We are on the air.
Oh.
That means shh.
I can't cuss.
Yeah, this is Sidebar. Thank you so much for listening. And, of course, we have here former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, and pharmaceutical researcher and director. And before I forget, and I do not want to, I want to say today's Veterans Day, and we need to honor American veterans of all wars. Salute to our veterans today.
Amen.
So today we are going to discuss what happened with those election results and another non-red wave, and as George called it, possibly a red trickle.
Yeah. We're getting used to trickles.
A little depressing.
Yeah.
Well, we got to keep it into context, too. I mean, this is an off-cycle election. It's kind of like our mayor and city council elections here in San Antonio in May, which it's not a gubernatorial election. It's not a presidential election. So there's always some oddness. I mean, look, this is an indicator that the Republicans better wake up. We'll talk about messaging. We'll talk about candidates. We'll talk about what they're doing collectively and money fundraising and things of this nature and how that fundraising is being done and leadership or lack thereof, and making an appeal to voters, because polling and election results aren't adding up. So people need something, either if the polls are accurate, and we've criticized polls in here before, well, then something is not causing people to do something and motivate them to act. And if they are accurate, then what's going on? So the results matter. I'm a results guy. I mean, in my world, the client wants results. We want results. It matters. Results matter. It doesn't matter. The process is great, but the result is the ultimate goal for us. So that's kind of how I think, and I think you guys have seen that in the past. So there's a lot to analyze on that.
And we're definitely going to continue with that. George.
Yeah, I'm not. I know what you said on the intro, and I think that was largely the case in the 2022 elections. I'm not as pessimistic about what just happened.
Good. I want to hear about it.
Well, if George is not, neither is Karen. That's
good. I'm following him. I'm standing by.
As usual, I might be dead wrong, but I'm willing to put up a good fight. We'll see what happens. But I think Nico's right on the larger point. I think that there's a lot to learn from this, and we darn well better learn from it if we are not to reproduce the same mistakes in 2024. But in totality, I think that this was more of a draw than anything else. I don't think anything changed.
Okay, so...
But expectation and perception is reality. Once again, the expectation was something else. So that messes with the psyche and the motivation of people coming up in the future elections. So it can't be ignored. I mean, again, the expectation matters. When your team, quote unquote, is not producing and people are talking about it and they're expecting it, and then it doesn't happen, I mean, that needs to be addressed as well, because then you're not going to get people off their ass later on to vote.
It makes me ask the question, Nico. Mm-hmm. You said that Republicans need to wake up. Well, don't we just have a few months left to wake up before it's too late, and we don't have to wake up anymore? We can just stay asleep.
Months left in what sense? I mean, the primaries are coming up. I mean, that's
exactly.
Not gonna, okay, well, the primary matters on who you're going to put into the ring to represent your platform. But the generals is where it's at. So we still have a year.
Okay. It seems like a very short time.
A lot can happen. No.
A lot can
happen in a year, man. A lot can happen in months. So, but people need to wake up. Look, abortion was still on the ballot. Let's just call it what it is. I know we need to analyze that. And George and I have dissected that. I talk about it often on different platforms from a societal standpoint. And then, of course, I even shelved my Christian faith for a while just to talk about the practical aspect of abortion, and we need to. Republicans need to talk about how they're going to handle that issue. It's being used against them. Even if you're a pro-life advocate, I'm pro-life, and I'll explain that. You need to handle the issue well. I mean, for 50 years, people were advocating get rid of Roe, and then Roe's gone and back to the states, and now what? And then seems like Republicans and conservatives are caught with their pants down, and they don't know what the hell to do with it. So the messaging sucks, obviously. Youngkin tried to change it at the end. I mean, he noticed it in the polling, and they're not handling it well, and they're uncomfortable when you talk about it, and they need to get more comfortable talking about it. I think it's a simple issue for me. It's not easy for many people, but it is for me, and it comes from how you think of the child in the womb, what you think about that. Is there consistency in other laws? And I talk about the capital murder laws when you murder a pregnant woman. And if we're going to look for the logical consistency in the advocacy points, and then a pro-life movement. I mean, has there been a pro-life movement to we can re-educate people? Because the other side's educating people on different issues. I mean, this is campaign 101. You can campaign for a product. You can campaign for a political movement. You can campaign for a politician or a public servant, potentially a candidate. And I don't see any of that organization and reasonable to speak.
But in the same way that the narrative can say a trans woman is a real woman, they also can say when it's inside, it's not a baby, but when it's outside, it's a baby. Well, yeah, they can change facts.
Well, no, it doesn't change facts. It doesn't change the truth.
They can change facts, is what I was saying.
But they still can't change the facts. They'll change their advocacy point and then maybe change your mind, but the truth is the truth. You can try to say all you want of whether I can fly. I can't fly. I don't care what the hell I think. So reality is reality. That's truth. It's objective. Doesn't care about your feelings. So we have to, how do we handle it in our advocacy points? My advocacy may change your mind. What I bombard you with and how I persuade you, that's different, but still doesn't change the truth.
So we're hoping for that glimmer of hope and light, besides George's comment. And so the glimmer of the Republican Party, whether you're a Republican or not these days, it's the other side of what this big woke movement is. So we're looking for that glimmer of hope, and then we watch the Republican debates.
Well, I didn't watch them.
Well, I didn't either. I don't
saw some
need
of the
to.
highlights
I'm
after.
too scared to watch it because
nothing changed.
Right. And so that's what I was talking about. How long do we need before this party gets together and becomes united? Because that's not what I was seeing.
I think it's a little healthy. I mean, I think Vivek rhymes with cake. That's what I remember saying his name. So Vivek, I think he's shocked a little bit. I mean, look, he's getting bolder. He's getting more comfortable in his skin. He said a lot of truth. People don't like it. So what? I think he shined, although I thought he got the most criticism from mainstream media, which means he did the best.
True.
So I think he did well. I like him. I saw him on. I didn't watch the whole show, but I saw him on Patrick Bet-David's show after. He's articulate. I don't agree with every little position he's on, but I think he seems genuine about what he wants for this country and for the party. I mean, look, he's maturing in that position. He's on the world and national stage. I think he's grown to be more comfortable in his political skin, and Ron DeSantis just doesn't seem to be able to get there. Although I think Ron did better, it seems. Nikki Haley, I don't know what she's doing. I think she's an interesting individual. I used to like her more than I do now as a candidate. I don't know as a person. Chris Christie's just an angry, miserable person. It seems to be. I don't know why the hell he's on that stage. But and Tim Scott he belongs in a church Wednesday church group talking about the gospel. I mean, he'll put you to sleep if you just pay attention. But I like him he seems like a neat dude, and he seems very genuine about his faith, and of course that attracts me.
And of course, nothing wrong with the gospel, right?
No, I love the gospel. I mean,
it's the messenger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Tim Scott is a dear man.
Yeah,
he's
seems
just
like
he's a walking sedative. And that's largely how I felt about the entire debate. And I was just curious to see what Americans generally are feeling about it. Going into the first debate, 49% of Americans believe that debates actually matter. Republicans, 49% of Republicans believe their own debates matter. That's a pretty paltry number. After the second debate, it was down to 40%, and now we're declining even. But this is the worst showing of all the debates. So our own Republican voters are saying, basically, we don't care. We really don't. And I didn't see anything in this last debate. I forced myself to watch it and late at night, which doesn't help because I fell asleep. And I mean, here's the thing. There's just nothing there to differentiate. For instance, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis.
She likes war.
On a number of issues, yes, with the exception of foreign policy, which is not a small issue. True enough,
it's a big deal.
But there's not huge differences between them. And when you look at the substantive issues, there's not a whole lot of daylight between them and the guy who is 30 to 50 points ahead. So Republican voters are saying, who cares, largely speaking, and I can't blame them. I'm not sure what Ron DeSantis' path forward is. I don't know what his path to 270 is. I don't know what his path to 2 is. He seems to have abandoned really going after Trump. He's been focusing, his campaign staffers and insiders seem to be focusing largely on the early states in the primaries. He's putting a ton of money and a ton of effort in Iowa. From the polling, it doesn't seem to be working. I don't really know what he's trying to do. He says he's going to. I heard Steve Deese, who has endorsed him, talk show host guy in Iowa, who says that Ron DeSantis is going to go to every single one of the 99 counties. He's going to do what Ted Cruz did in order to beat Donald Trump, as he did in the primary in 2016. But again, we got to think big picture. Ted Cruz lost. That's sort of the bottom line. And Ron DeSantis is nowhere near Trump. And at the end of the day, what happened in 2016? Cruz had 8 delegates. Trump had 7. So I don't know. DeSantis seems lost. Nikki Haley's irrelevant. Chris Christie, to Nico's point, what is he doing on stage? And Tim Scott's a sleeper. And Vivek is the one who really managed to actually state what some of the things that voters really care about. Yeah. The problem with Vivek is that, I hate to say it, but I think that Chris Christie may have branded him as being sort of like talking to ChatGPT, because I think he's full of substance. And I think he says stuff really well, but he does kind of seem overtly rehearsed. Yeah. He seems almost a little too smooth around the edges. He seems a little disingenuous. Now, I don't think he is, but I think he's coming across that way.
You're looking at objectively,
starting point, objectively, I think he comes across way too rehearsed. He seems kind of plastic, and I think it's hurting him deeply. So, but if you're going to give the debate to a winner, I have to give it to him, because, again, he's echoing what people are really caring about.
And I know we're going to break, but debates are important to me. As someone who's been a candidate and an elected official, debates are important, but the way they do them suck. And I have a suggestion on debates. I think, not that they'll listen to my suggestion, but debates need to be substantive. And you can't have these 15-second response, 30-second response, but there's a way to do it, in my humble opinion, but they're not doing it.
I want to tell everybody that after we come back from the break, I hope you explain that to us. We have more coming up next. This is Sidebar. Remember, you can go to sidebartv.com. That's where you can find us on social media platforms, just about every single one of them. And after the show that's on the air, we will continue for like 45 minutes afterwards with the show, saying the things that Nika can say off the air.
I won't get bleeped.
Just kidding. So Vivek, during the debate, said, why do we continue to have these debates where the other side gets to ask all the questions? Why don't we have like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan up talking to us and asking us about the things that really matter? You said, Nico, that there should be another type of format. What were you talking about?
I'd like to see it a little bit more of an adversarial and trial mode. So in a trial, you get to present your evidence. There's some cross-examination. You get opening and closing statements. And you get time to flush and present your evidence to the trier of fact so they can get substance, and then they can apply the burden of proof, come back with a verdict. I mean, this is a trial. It's a trial to the American people. And so it needs to be structured differently. I think you need to have more time to answer questions. I would like to see a portion of a debate where the candidates actually cross-examine each other, not just the moderator, because then you have these biases and that, which was Vivek's point about this. Bring some real people in here that don't have any allegiance to either tribe, that they're going to really get down to the heart of the matter and talk about what the American people want to hear. Once you get a time to flesh out an answer, 3 minutes, something not 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then they're all fighting to go over. Just say, look, you have your substantial, you have a time to answer without giving another speech or a thesis. Then say, look, you're going to get a 30-second grace period. Then we're turning off the mic. So there has to be still order and control. Because you're fighting for time, it turns into a Royal Rumble and a name-calling session. If you want to spend your time calling the other one names, great. That's going to play out in front of the jury or not, meaning the American people. So it needs to be structured differently because these are important to hear from the candidates, and I want to see them spar a little bit, but it's got to be done with different rules. These rules of engagement suck.
And unfortunately, the candidates have very little say in the final analysis. It's the Republican National Committee. We really need to come back to Ronna McDaniel because this is a major point in the debate. When you could hear a pin drop. He said, look, I'll cede my time and I'll give Ronna McDaniel an opportunity to come up here and resign. I mean, wow, what a hit. And now, was that flamboyant? Maybe, but it was also the sentiment of an overwhelming majority of Republican voters. I mean, there is a culture of losing, I think is the way he said it. Mm-hmm. And who structures these debates? It's the Republican National Committee. I mean, they lead the structure of these debates. The other side would never do it this way, ever. I mean, look at what they're doing. They're doing virtually nothing. There's no debates. They do what they want to do, whatever it takes to win. We don't do that. We're just stupidly following some weird formula that I think is incoherent. What are we doing having MSNBC people asking questions that are clearly weighted with basically built-in left-wing?
I thought it was good that he called out the moderator. That was a good move, man.
Viewpoints.
That was a good move.
He did.
Move.
But I mean, Hugh Hewitt, I want to, just as an exception, I think he's very good. He's a long-time talk show host. I've liked him for years. He's trained as an attorney. He understands constitutional law very, very well. He has very substantive shows, and he was really trying to have substantive questions. He was trying to have meaningful questions on foreign policy, on what you're going to do at the southern border, on raging anti-Semitism in colleges and universities across the country. He was pushing for that on policy with regard to Israel. I mean, you could tell he was trying to come back to that. Ramaswamy didn't hit him. He hit MSNBC, but his larger hit was against our own. And that resonates with voters because people recognize that there's truly a leadership crisis. Under her leadership, this is since 2016, she assumed the helm in 2017. We lost the House in 2018. We lost the presidency in 2020. We lost the Senate in 2022. And we did nowhere near as well as we wanted to do this cycle in 2023. That's all under Ronna McDaniel. The messaging sucks and the funding is even worse. What happened in Virginia
no one
was
wants to fund losers.
No, I mean, this is a major criticism.
Simply said.
What are you saying?
It's a major criticism right now that hasn't been answered, Nico. The Virginia loss, Virginia Republicans are saying we were after the Republican National Committee for much more funding. We desperately needed funding. Democrats pumped a ton of money.
Well, that commercial, I saw
on abortion ads alone.
Did you see that commercial?
Brother,
I mean,
yes.
it pulled at your heartstrings. And notice they didn't mention abortion. Look, we got to get good marketers, and your messaging matters. I mean, that's what I do every day when we talk about trials and juries, and you pick a jury, and maybe some people may or may not like you or like your client or like your position, but how you message it and preparing their mind during what we call voir dire and jury selection. We got to look at these campaigns as trials. You have to get the right jury. You have to prepare them, and voir dire or jury selection is also about educating your potential jury member that may end up on your jury whether you like it or not. And so you've planted seed. It's an opportunity to find out what they think, how to communicate to them, and then you can strategize throughout the trial of how to present that evidence to them and what to advocate at the end. So we're not doing those things. We're not strategizing. We're not shrewd as a snake, a serpent, and innocent as a dove and shrewd as a serpent, as we say in Matthew 10:16. We've got to get wiser. We've got to be strategic. We have to understand the battlefield and the rules of engagement, and we're not doing that.
I think that's really what's behind the abortion situation. It's not that Democrats will have you believe that everybody is now pro-choice. And that's just not true. It's certainly not true with conservatives. And yet, it looks like we basically abandon the pro-life movement with some of these. So we need to understand that. I think what Nico's bringing up about messaging, it needs to be understood. You saw it consistently. You saw it in Virginia, where most of the ads from Republicans were about what? Not abortion at all. There was no counter message at all. There really wasn't in Virginia. Actually, Ronna McDaniel brought this up. Now,
Well, her money could, not her
she
money,
provided no money.
Helped, yeah.
She didn't raise it. She didn't counsel. The Virginia Republicans are saying we heard nothing from the RNC. If they had a problem with the fact that there were all these ads on abortion from the Democrats and that we were busy over here talking about crime and nobody cared, not that nobody cares about crime, but abortion was flooding the airwaves, why did the Republican National Committee not counsel otherwise?
What's the answer?
And why didn't they put a bunch of money behind some decent counter message? Well, that's true. That's a legitimate criticism. She didn't have an answer for that. The same thing happened in Ohio.
But look, Virginia is a wonderful test model for me. I remember Virginia is the state that almost passed a law that said you could have a baby, quote unquote, keep it comfortable, then decide what you want to do. That's Virginia. And then Youngkin and the AG and the lieutenant governor are all Republican. So don't say that you can't win in Virginia. Messaging matters. And so
I agree 100%. So what happened here?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are really good at that, and they sucked.
Who's really good
here?
at it?
The Youngkin crew, frankly, could have done much better because they know better. I mean, they're very good at counter messaging. Look, his objective, and he made it clear, he wanted to get control of the Senate, and he wanted to retain control of the House in his own legislature. He didn't get control of the Senate, and he lost the House in Virginia.
Because pain is a good motivator. And since Youngkin, Lieutenant Governor, and the Attorney General have been more conservative, the state's doing better. So what does it say? Strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and then you start that cycle all over again. I mean, I haven't looked at Virginia. Maybe they've done a good job. Maybe things are different. Things are calm. People feel more stable, so they let your guard down. You have to understand that. That's reality too.
That's it. They let their guard down, and they let the messaging on abortion just suffuse the state. The same thing happened in Ohio. It's outrageous that Ohio, which is clearly a red state, by the way, Virginia is no red state. That's a blue state.
Never been.
So no question Republicans had a taller hurdle to scale there. But in Ohio, it's a red state. How the hell did we just basically constitutionalize abortion with parents virtually having no say? This is nuts. What exactly happened? And I went back and I listened to some of those ads, and there were two things that stuck out at me, Nico. They were making claims, and the Democrats are much better at disinformation and propaganda than we are. They're so good at messaging. We just absolutely suck. They basically said that if a woman miscarried, she would not receive care. Tons of ads basically saying that. And basically saying that rape victims are going to have to carry their babies to term. Now, the first issue is an abject lie, that there's not going to be any miscarriage. Now, a lot of people have miscarriages. Unfortunately, miscarriages are increasing in number, not decreasing. So you can understand why people will be afraid of that. And in the idea that rape victims are going to have to carry their babies to term, that should be explained. The GOP governor was nowhere to be found on this. Mike DeWine. Nowhere to be found. He didn't even want to touch the issue. There was no counter messaging of that whatsoever. Why?
But ignoring these topics that are so hot with the Democrats is only going to let the Democrats get away with it if it's a lie. And obviously it worked.
Yeah, well, look, you're going to have to look at this issue I'm pro-life, like I said, and George and I have dissected this issue on R-Rated and on here before, and we'll probably talk about it more on the after show. But you're going to have to be comfortable in a space, even if you don't like it. Just when you tell people there's going to be a ban, that's going to be used against you with no exceptions. Life of the mom, rape. Whether it doesn't change the innocence of the child, even with a horrible event like sexual assault. But still, people, again, perception is reality. The messaging has been used against conservatives or people that are pro-life. You're going to have to say, okay, this is because most people don't want not due date abortions. The vast majority, nobody wants. There's some line for people, even people that are pro-life. There's some line, and you've heard my advocacy on it. People that are pro-choice, I want to know why. Number one, and they don't focus on the child; they focus on the mommy. But then also, you need to change the capital murder laws, because if you murder a woman that's pregnant, the statute in Texas and most states says you've murdered a child under 10. If you murder a 9-year-old, if you murder an 8-year-old, 7, 6, 5, 4, all the way to one day, you will be facing death. Death in Texas and many states. Why? Because the statute identifies a child in a mommy's womb. So I'm not even talking about Christianity. If I agree with the statute and that's a child in a mommy's womb, then when is it ever okay to end the life of an innocent child? Either then change the statute and don't identify that as a child. And then if your cousin, your daughter, your mom, your aunt is murdered, or the child is murdered, then that should be ag assault with serious bodily injury charge, which is a second-degree felony versus capital murder. You have to be logically consistent and advocate that. That's part of the re-education of people. And I look for consistency, you know that, in my advocacy, and then also in critiquing other advocacy. And so this all boils into, Karen, the messaging. The messaging is not there. We have to have a discussion about it, and we're not doing it as the conservatives aren't doing it for sure.
Going back to the debates and the I guess Trump, the third time in a row not being there. Do you think that he is the only one that's going to be able to talk about these topics like abortion or the border or sending all the illegals back? Because each time one of these debates happens, all of the candidates, I don't know if some take a strong stand, most try to avoid it.
On what? Which one?
Anything. Abortion. Let's talk about abortion. Has Trump come out to say, what he feels about abortion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. And I think I think your question is an important question, Karen, because it does raise the issue that there's been a shift in republicanism. There is. There's no question that there's more of a liberal social bent in republicanism and conservatism, and it's part of that populism move, and Trump represents that.
Well, I know, but for the time being, how come you don't hear so much about that anymore? How come you don't hear what Trump's saying that he's going to do unless it's, let's send everybody back?
Well, I mean, I think people are trying to avoid Trump right now because it's all about Trump, and they're trying to find their own identity.
But they can't ignore him.
No, you can't ignore him. I mean, look, Trump's not going to be here even if he's president for 4 more years. I mean, Trump can't be the face of a conservative movement. He just can't. He can be a defender right now, but he can't be the face of the conservative movement. He's not. He doesn't own MAGA. I mean, he kind of made it popular, but making America great again is a concept that I think any conservative and really any Democrat should want, by the way. I mean, this is not just a Republican, shouldn't be a Republican thing.
Okay, we will take a break right now, and we'll be right back. sidebartv.com. Remember, we're on social media right now, but we continue after the show at 10 o'clock for about 45 minutes, and we'd love to have your comments. We'd also love for you to become a sponsor, a contributor to the show so that we can continue. If we can, let's go back to Trump. When it comes to the debates, he wasn't there again, but he doesn't really seem to need the debates because his numbers are great. They continue to grow. Is that right, George? Or
yeah, Trump hasn't been done in one. I mean, we've tracked that in and out of debates. The first debate came in 58, left at 58%. Second debate, he actually went up. It was a net loss of 7 points to DeSantis, and Trump went up to 63%. There's no evidence anything's changed whatsoever in this third debate. So Trump seems largely undented, frankly. He was 30 minutes away in Hialeah, Florida, while this debate was going on in Miami, Nico. 30 minutes away at about 10 to 15,000 people. The liberal media said, what? Only 10 or 15,000 people? What a sleeper. Okay, great. Thanks. I mean, it was a raucous debate, and he was speaking to issues. Listen to the rally. I mean, other than the times when he goes off on his soliloquies, Trump does talk substance at his debates. When he sticks to the script, and he does. I mean, largely he does. But I mean, Trump's got to do Trump, right? That's never going to stop. So he does go off, but there's a lot of substance in there. And so that's 30 minutes away. And you look at what people were listening. They weren't listening to the debate. I mean, a mile away from the debate stage in Miami, you had Trump shirts and you had Trump paraphernalia. I didn't see one for Tim Scott. I didn't see one for Nikki. I didn't see one for DeSantis. So Trump is going to be the nominee. I'm saying it right here and right now. He's going to be the nominee unless, of course, there's something that happens with regard to his 91 counts and 4 trials. Who knows? But that's not going to stop him from being the nominee, though. He's going to be the nominee. And there's not a damn thing DeSantis is doing. He's burning up. Let's get back to this issue of what Trump represents, I think, to Republicanism, because it's important, Nico, tying back to abortion. We need to recognize that there's been a shift. The Reagan coalition is no more, in my view. There were certain premises, certain tenets of the Reagan coalition. There was this on economics, on governance, social conservatism, projecting power across the world, this whole notion of peace through think, the projection of American power. There's been 2 major shifts, as I see it, from the Reagan coalition, where now you see this sort of Trumpism or Trump coalition. And that has happened. There's a lot of shared concerns. Certainly a strong nationalism, a strong border. Those things are shared. Strong economics. Those things are very, very shared. Individual liberties, personal freedoms. Those things are shared. Respect for the Constitution. Absolute love, a deep, deep, deep love for America. Those things are shared, and they're potent. But where I've seen 2 shifts is on the issue of abortion. That Trump Republicans are not much, but less conservative than your traditional pro-life evangelical or Protestant voter, which really held sort of a stronghold inside the Republican Party. And I think that, look, since Roe fell, we've had 6 referenda in red states. 6 referenda, anywhere from severe restrictions on abortion to outright bans, and every single one of them has failed. And they haven't failed because of Democrats. It's been Republicans that have done that. I mean, I'm thinking about Kentucky and Kansas. And now in Ohio, I'm stunned by it. Until you step back and realize 2 things. The messaging thing is important, Nico. We've talked about that. But I think there's also a shift inside Republicanism. We need to understand it. And we need to find a way to message and reach those people to help them understand. Because they're buying, I think to a large extent, they're buying into the Democrat mantra of fear that women are going to be dying in back alleys. There's not going to be any care for people who have miscarriages. Some of these insane comments, that's finding its way into these voters. But they're I think, inherently less conservative on that issue. And they're also, I think, much less Reagan coalition esque in terms of projecting American power. You see the shift with Ukraine. I mean, you would never have seen this 25 years ago. They would have been marching lock and step. And we see a real rift in the House right now in terms of people who support Ukraine. So I think on those 2 issues, I think that's very Trumpian and non-Reagan-esque. We just need to recognize that, and we got to find a way to reach our own, find a way to reconnect these people and bring them out and vote in a way that's truly conservative. I'm sorry, but we lost them. We lost them this time around.
But how do you separate the message that the Democrats have to something that is palatable for the Republicans without saying.
But see, the Democrats aren't being forced to defend their position. So even if you're pro-life, there's a distinction within the pro-life movement on what's acceptable or not. I mean, there's people that are saying all the way till due date, post, even post date. Some very small, but still, there's a movement. It always starts with a seed, and then but there's some restrictions. Most people that are pro-life want some restriction. They just don't want abortion on demand, and it definitely not up to the due date. But they're not being forced to defend that.
Right.
That's the issue. We're playing piñata mentality. We're playing defense instead of, hey, you have to defend your position also. And so we need to kind of understand, okay, if you're quote unquote conservative or Republican, what is the position? Now, of course, you're entitled to have your own individual position, but be able to defend it. But what's the collective position of the party? Because the Democrats are just saying we're pro-life, period, end of story. We're not saying anything. Yep. You're trying to ban it. We're just trying to make it an option for women. You see the difference? It's an option here. It's a complete ban over there. And that's the messaging that people are taking away from. But you asked Georgia a question, number one. Okay, I want to get back to this one thing, and then we can move on. Debate absence. I have some mixed feelings about that. So the Democrats are not doing any debates. And so when Trump doesn't show up to these debates, as we know him, and doesn't take a rocket scientist, he's going to be the candidate. I mean, you don't have to be some scholar to understand that part. The numbers just speak for themselves. But whatever. So let's say he's the candidate. So it's Trump and Biden again. Joe says, well, Trump didn't show up. I don't need to show up. People just look at his record, look at mine. Now there's not going to be any debates at all. So you're setting this precedent. That's my concern. That's my issue.
I even want to go one better. I agree with you. I even want to go one better. I think practically he doesn't need to show up. Fine, check. But I think Nico's on to something here, and it's really important. I'd like to add one more concern. People need to be tested. And I know Trump's been president, and I know he went to debates in 2016. But there's a whole new culture right now.
I would have liked to see him at this debate.
I would like to see him tested. I'd like to see him under fire. I'd like to see him. Let's say the questions that are hurled at him are completely bogus. So what? Welcome to bogus land. We're in bogus land right now, but he still needs to contest that. He still needs to respond to that. And so I would like to see him go through a primary seasoning process, because who knows what the hell's going to happen in a general election at this point. I think that would be good for him. And I think, unfortunately, he's largely out of it.
Strategically, he should have been at this debate. I mean, think about it. He would have sucked the oxygen out of the room. The debate would have been watched just to watch a prize fight. Even Democrats everybody would have watched it. He would have an opportunity to bring in people that maybe are on the fence of voting for him, and then he could really show, like, man, I want this dude. And he could have. That's where he's used to thrive in this situation. Maybe he's kind of rusty. I don't know, because I mean, it's a skill. And so I think this should have been. I can see the first two maybe, but this was a small enough field. I mean, he was used to being against 16 people. Remember the first time? I think he should have been at this debate, and he definitely needs to be at the future debates. He has. I think he does, and I think you're setting a bad precedent, and I think he needs to get in there and mix it up and say, I'm not here for them. I'm here for the people. But I mean, it could be a marketing PR monstrosity of a success. And I'm just some schmuck with an opinion. I'm saying somebody else is, I'm sure, have thought of this. I don't know.
And of course, Trump's position is these people are largely irrelevant. It was a fight for number two, which is almost laughable if you think about it. Everybody's fighting for number two, and number two isn't 2 points away from Trump. Number two, by all of the polls, and this I know what DeSantis is saying, his whole campaign is saying, well, polls don't vote. Yeah, I know, but every single poll, brother, has you a minimum of 35 points to 50 points behind Trump, depending whether you're looking at generally or state level polls. Come on. So Trump's position is, are you serious? I mean, if I take these people seriously, then others are going to start taking them seriously, and there's no way I'm going to do that. So there's some merit to that.
Yeah, but nobody's thinking of it that way. I don't think they are. I don't know.
No, I'm saying he's thinking of it that way.
I think so, but I still, this is, to me.
He's got a large flashlight, Nico. I mean, that does seem to me a little cogent to say, I've got such a huge flashlight, such a huge platform. If I pay attention to you, all of a sudden you become relevant. This is no different of somebody who's nobody getting on Joe Rogan, for instance. All of a sudden, there's a gigantic beam of light on them, and they become kind of relevant.
So the fear is he's going to lose votes for it? I mean, that he's going to lose support because somebody's going to put him...
I think what he's saying, Nico, I think what he would say, and I'm just from what I'm hearing in terms of the rhetoric is, I've got enough distractions. Thanks so much. I don't need any more, and I sure as hell don't need to put oxygen in your balloon.
And then Joe's going to say, I got enough distractions running this country. I don't need any more. Trump's going to be in prison.
Except the difference. But the difference is that the Democrats have soured on Biden. They haven't soured on our causes, but they've soured on Biden. His polling is horrendous. Trump's polling continues to go up, debate after debate after debate, and he's absent. So I think those are significant differences. But Biden's going to do whatever the hell he wants to do anyway.
His polls going up is not trickling over to down ballot candidates.
No, not at all.
So there's legitimate criticism of him being the leader of the Republican Party, and he's not having any effect on any people. He's not helping anybody, obviously.
And he hasn't really campaiged for anyone.
I got it, but
for anyone either. I think
but
again,
if he's the brand, then that's what people are voting for. They're voting for the Trump brand. I mean, look, I'm just being objective.
I'm not disagreeing.
I'm not trying to rag on him or not rag on him. I'm just making observations. If he's the brand, it's not trickling down.
Fair enough. And yet, 91 counts, 4 trials. I think he's a little busy, and so I think
their strategy is working.
He's got to pick. He's got to pick his battles.
Then their strategy is working, and the criticism is legit. He's too busy over there. He's not helping other candidates. He's not helping the Republican brand. He can't beat Joe Biden. We can't have it both ways. That's all I'm saying.
They're booed. Huh? But if any candidate brings up his name, they're booed. Chris Christie.
Well, I mean, in these circles, yes.
Yes.
But, I'm big picture. I don't care as much about that. I care about November of 2024.
I hear the music. As you deem appropriate, let's talk a little bit more about that, because it's an interesting proposition you raised there.
Okay, we will come back after this with more on Sidebar. Top of the hour, but afterwards you can catch us live on any platform that you have available. You can find them all at sidebartv.com. So, we continue. What were we going to talk about? I already forgot. I'm sorry. It's so crazy because we do
it this morning.
Okay, so the agenda. What did you say?
Did you take your ginkgo biloba?
No, I didn't. I should take more. Okay, we talk about the agenda.
We went to the manifesto. We talk about Islamic movement in universities.
I want to talk about the manifesto.
Pro-Palestine protest, anti-Israel. What do you want to talk about?
That's why my head can't remember all of this stuff. But let's talk about the manifesto, because
what manifesto?
The manifesto in Nashville for the shooter, the mass shooter. So it's so funny that thing was buried. They wouldn't release it. The police officers wouldn't release it. No one would talk about it. And now it got leaked, and we find out what we all assumed, that it didn't go along with the narrative of the other side. And so why did they hold it back? I
can just tell you what they claimed they held it back for. They claimed they held it back for the victims and people to heal. And I mean, they've never done that in other situations. No. I mean, so I would look for consistency. Yeah. I want to see the same standard, the same principles apply across the board to all situations, whether it's my tribe, that tribe, this whatever party. It doesn't matter, ideology. We've got to have consistency in our system, in our justice system, in our society. We don't want this two-tiered way of looking at things. And I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it was an evil, disturbed woman who, identified as trans, so that doesn't help the brand, right? When you're talking about advocacy points and this transgender cultish movement, and this whole thing, because we're fighting over men competing against women and this and that, and men being women of the year. I mean, we've really lost our minds. I mean, this is not controversial stuff. That portion of it is, but if you look at her manifesto, it was just pure evil. I mean, it's very calculated, very planned. I hope I have a high death rate count. She called them, crackers and this evil, just effing this and little. I mean, just she was targeting these children. I mean, they did nothing to her. This is just a depraved, seared conscience that I pray and I believe that the Lord has handled appropriately now that she's on outside this earth.
I was stunned by how her rhetoric, how the stuff that she wrote was really mostly about herself, if you think about it. So she's saying, let me just read what she wrote. Quote, "Kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddies' Mustangs and convertibles. F you, little S. I wish to shoot your weak-ass D's with your mop yellow hair. Want to kill all you little crackers. Bunch of little expletive for homosexuals. With your white privileges, F you," and then the expletive again for homosexual persons. I mean, this is how it went on and on. So she hates white people. She's white. She hates prep school kids. She went to that same exact school. And then she unloads. I mean, this is the racialism here is just is vicious. I mean, it's totally. But you could hear this hatred, but not just hatred, but self-hatred. And again, we've said this many times. These kids. She's 28 years old. Okay, she's right in that demographic. They're not born hating themselves. Where does this come from? It's a legitimate question. That was my first observation. The second observation is that we know from her parents that she had been undergoing a lot of treatments, Nico. Puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. These things we've said many times, and it's all over the literature.
Yes.
They just completely mutilate your body.
But also
destroy
the effects on your psyche.
Absolutely, psychologically and physically. And I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about testosterone treatments to the extent that we're talking about. If you look at the amount of testosterone that a male has relative to a female, I mean, there's a difference of some 30 times. And testosterone is a biochemical component that gives the average male the extra skeletal muscle, extra muscle, many more red blood cells. They give the average male the aggressive component, and I'm piecing all this together, and it's not a nature or nurture argument. It's both of them. There's the teaching of this aggression, and then there's the biochemical element, and it was a perfect storm.
Well, I mean, think about we've I think appropriately and objectively criticized SSRI drugs in here before. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, antidepressant drugs, and the known side effects of suicidal tendencies and violent behavior. That is a known side effect. That's not Nico LaHood or George Arujo or Karen Cross. So when you're talking about these hormone puberty blockers, you're injecting and infusing all these other substances into a person's body that's trying to go through this transition stage that has tremendous effects psychologically. And there's side effects on the way you think, depression, suicidal tendencies, anger. I mean, I don't know her life. I would like to analyze the way she was raised and what she was dealing with, and whether there were any signs of this before. She notated in her manifesto that she thought she was going to get caught in 2000 and whenever, 21 or whatever it was, and she can't believe she was here. I mean, this was very deliberate. This was a reprobate heart, because she didn't seem like she was talking about people are whispering in her ears and she's hearing voices. She didn't say that. The devil's talking to me, Satan's making me do it. She seemed very calculated. And so she has this delusional, seared conscience where she looks at the world very, very differently. And I want to know the root cause of that. right? I don't, Dom, did you have a question, Dom, or you were saying something you wanted to talk? Yeah, there's a lot. Well, look, and this is only a piece of it, because they didn't let. There's hundreds of this stuff. I mean, there's a lot, and the people have the right to know. So I categorically refuse this whole. There's an investigation. Investigating what? She's dead. They're not prosecuting her. People have a right to know. The families have a right to know. The public has a right to know. That's part of the healing process, by the way. If you would have held information from me and my family about my brother's murder, then, because guess what? This was coming out in a trial. You weren't going to avoid this. If she did not pass away and she was tried for capital murder, and I would have hoped they would have sought the death penalty on her, then this was going to come out anyway, in punishment and guilt, innocence, whatever, even if the rules of evidence are argued. So this, you're not going to spare the public. So you got to think deeper. Why are you holding this back? Because people have a right to know,
Absolutely.
And it actually is part of the healing process, not the other way around.
Amen to that. I mean, the public has a right to know what was motivating her, and I take her words at face value. I really do. And I actually take the Justice Department at face value. 98% of all mass shooters are male. Okay, this is a female. I don't know. It's an anomaly. It's worth the research.
Unless you're pumped full of testosterone.
That's why I'm asking. I'm curious about that. I think we can't dismiss that. There's a lot of legitimate science behind that. I think it's worth pursuing. And then there's the nurture aspect. I mean, read it. Here's her emotional state. Quote, "Can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. God, let my wrath take over my anxiety." Okay. Really? I mean, these are the talking points, this hyper-racialization. These are the talking points of the left here. And this stuff is bred and it's pumped in America's academic institutions. These are Marxist claims that America's hopelessly and institutionally racist. So the solution is to strip all whites of their privilege. And how did she do that? Well, let's just kill them.
But think about what go to finish your thought, George. No, go ahead.
I think that this is microcosmic of a larger reality. We need to deal with this reality. We mentioned it last week. Nico, I'm probably going to get very boring to listen to and maybe annoying, but I'm going to keep talking about it because this is dangerous stuff. I mean, can you imagine this movement, this ideology on steroids? And I'm suggesting to you it's pervasive in the culture right now, especially in 18 to 39-year-olds.
So the typical movement after something like this is to take away the weapon, to take away the object that the deranged person used. I mean, you have people that use cars to kill people, the guns, knives, bats, hammers, bludgeon people. People die from bludgeon much more than people think, meaning beat to death. But she said something. Think about this, which really can be used to advocate why we should arm more people, the right people, and why schools should not be a gun-free zones for the right person, by the way, not from the students. I hope my victims aren't. When you look at all these mass shootings, they're picking places where they hope their victims are not armed. I mean, so this stupid and illogical movement of take the weapons away from the people that have no reason to take them away it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't play out in the data. If you really analyze the data and you look at what these people are looking for, Hamas knew what they were doing when Israel didn't have guns. They had mortars. They were prepared for mortars. They had bomb shelters, but they weren't prepared for a one-on-one attack and actual gun battle. If they had a Second Amendment, they wouldn't have had that much, and maybe it even discouraged them. So again, there's so much to unpack here. To Dom's point, not only on a psychological, from a spiritual and emotional and moral perspective, from an academia perspective, and the indoctrination and why people from this intellectual Marxism movement that's like George is saying, oppressed and oppressor, which ties into this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic movement and this Marxist mindset that has infiltrated over decades our society. Young people are taught to hate this country. This country is flawed because it's run by dumbass people like us, right? We're all, what's wrong with this what's wrong with this world? What's wrong with this world? That's a humble heart before the Lord saying, I need sanctification and I want to be better tomorrow, looking at God as my example, not the world, not politics, not some politician, not anybody. So we have to, there's so much to unpack here. We're talking about moral rot and how that plays out, but yet we want to play with aim objects, and we want to apply this selective rage when it fits and suits an agenda. We've got to get away from that and start calling balls and strikes and have a moral compass that we can apply to all circumstances. I'm thinking of justice system, Lady Justice wearing a blindfold. Let's put a blindfold on and start thinking about what kind of culture meaning the way we do things we want in this country, because we don't have it right now.
So we ideologize, we destroy their minds in school, and then we destroy them physically. We allow them to mutilate their bodies, and we have a medical industry that's endorsing these experimental biochemical treatments, and these are experimental. I think we should probably clarify that. Puberty blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones have not been, to my knowledge, they've not been approved by the FDA.
But
so I don't know of any. Somebody, if you guys are listening in, please correct me on that. I don't know of any puberty blocking drug or any cross-sex hormone that's been released by the FDA, and we have a medical industry that's pushing this crap on children and adults.
That's a whole different ballgame, man. Look, we're going to talk about all this stuff, right, Karen?
absolutely.
So we have the after show. Guys, please join us. We might talk about this more. We'll talk about this anti-Israel movement. We'll talk about the transgender movement. I know that was talked about before. We can talk about anything.
The Catholic Church?
The Catholic Church, and they made a difference. Yeah, that's why that came up, because the Catholic Church recently, just I think this week, said that a transgender person can be a godparent and can be baptized, which is an interesting position to take. And so a lot of people had questions about that. Look, guys, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this. Share this with someone you might think benefit from it. Have a very blessed weekend. Happy Veterans Day.
a question. I think I got this in my head straight. When I heard about the suppression of that manifesto, I was like, okay, because they're holding it back, we all know what's in it. It's something that doesn't fit into the narrative. But the deeper thing that made me just cringe is that when I still, to this day, hear the story, if only we had really known about Hunter Biden's laptop, the election would have come out differently. And it just makes me think, it makes me cringe because suppressing evidence really does work for the other side. I mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it when you hold back information?
Yeah,
but why go back in time and say, if only?
Well, it's so you don't do it again. I mean, for me, it's when you have a case review, if you appeal a case and you get remanded and you try it again, or at least that's case law for the future. It's called precedent. So it matters. I mean, that's why a judge's rulings matter in a case, because it either keeps evidence out or allows evidence in that may be the deciding factor to the trier of fact on what verdict they're going to come back with. So it's a huge deal.
It is, but they still suppressed that manifesto. They did it, and just. I think, what did they put the 7 Nashville police officers on administrative leave trying to find out who leaked it? So that kind of thing is still
the citizens
happen.
of Nashville should vote anybody out that tried to suppress it.
Okay, well,
Again,
let's talk about that. Yeah. Please continue.
What do you mean?
No, I mean because it was the mayor who went out there and said, I think, 2 completely contradictory things, and they ought to fire his ass ASAP. I mean, quote, ASAP. I'm deeply concerned with the safety, security, and well-being of the Covenant families and all Nashvillians who are grieving. This is Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell. And in the same breath, he says that he wants to initiate an investigation into how these images could have been released. Those are contradictory statements.
They are.
And so they're not, I think they seem a lot less concerned.
How are they contradictory? I mean, maybe I missed it. What do you mean contradictory?
How do you do one without the other? I mean,
because
you're concerned about them,
back,
right?
But now he's like, well, who the hell let it go out?
He's concerned about their families, but then he wants to initiate an investigation into the releasing of the images rather than the content of what Audrey Hale said. That's where the investigation should be.
I think they're 2 different things. I mean, if there's a policy in play, you don't want information leaking out. Now, we're saying that this information should have been released. Mm-hmm. But if you have a process of holding sensitive information, I want to know whether it should be released or not, separate than whether our process is broken down. So I don't think they're contradictory statements, because let's say there's information that everybody agrees shouldn't go out there. Like there's a trial, like this woman wasn't killed, and she's going to be standing trial, and this thing came out. We'd be pissed off that it was released because due process says it shouldn't be out yet. Not in the court of public opinion. It should be in the case. So I would be concerned of how this got leaked. That's a separate issue that stands alone. We're tying it together. I don't think they should be tied together. I want to know, if I was him, I want to know how it should, why it was leaked, how it was leaked, but it shouldn't have been held back in the first place. They're separate issues for me.
Well, I think that
I get what you're saying.
I think it rings a little hollow, I guess is what I'm saying.
I mean, no, that's different. I get what you're saying. That's legit. But again, I'm looking at this separately, objectively.
But I think they're contradictory ends. I think the objectives are contradictory. To say you're concerned about safety, security, and well-being of the Covenant families, but then you want to initiate an investigation into how these images would be released because he's disturbed about the release of them, rather than in the very thing that destroyed their safety and security, which is what Audrey Hale wrote and did. So we have to get to the bottom of it. And it's not like, I mean, what you're talking about a court of law, for instance, I'm guessing, where maybe there's a criminal investigation, somebody's in a court of law, you got to control.
I'm just talking about as the former district attorney, if somebody would release evidence from our office, and there was a process of maintaining information, and it was released, I want to know how that got breached. That's separate than whether it shouldn't have been held back in the first place.
But how does that scenario tie to this, though? I'm a genuine question.
He's questioning. He's saying this. So you're starting from the position it should have never been held in the first place. So you're justifying the ends with the means. And I'm saying no. This information is considered non-releasable. That it's been classified by him. And we're saying it's wrongfully not. It's wrongfully designated as that.
Okay.
As a mayor, he's saying
it's in a different category than what you just said as a DA, though.
No. That information in his mind shouldn't have been released, and he wants to know why it got released when it wasn't authorized to be released. We're saying it should have never been held back in the first place, so we're okay that it should have been released. That's like saying to me, well,
You were in possession of child pornography anyway. Who cares if we didn't follow due process and the Fourth Amendment to get you, you dirty son of a bitch?
I get
that was
what
it.
you're saying.
Well, hold on, wait a minute. But if you cut corners to get the dirty son of a bitch, you're going to cut corners to get the innocent person. And I'm just into. There's a process in place. I would have rather gone to a court and said, wait a minute, this should have never been held. I want this person demanded to release them instead of it being leaked. I would be concerned about the leak if I was the mayor, DA, chief. I would have wanted to go the right way and said, give me this stuff because we have a right to it. Oh, I won't say what I want. Screw you. Give me this stuff. And now it's a directive saying a court says, release it, mayor. You cannot hold it back.
Yeah, I guess what I'm arguing is it seems to be a different category when you brought up the DA example versus what's going on here. You've got a mayor, you've got media sources, and you've got perhaps courts, and certainly the police department, with the exception of some, I guess, that I guess were had
The
helped to
seven that
release
are
this
under
right.
investigation.
And I'm saying those are categorically different. So my expectation that information wouldn't be released in your category is fundamentally different than it should be released here.
See, but your
They're not the same.
Your position of saying it should be released is justifying the leak, and I'm saying it shouldn't have been leaked. It should have been directed to be released. Because think about you have a mayor. Think about you have a mayor.
We're saying the same thing differently.
Let's say you have a mayor that you like, and let's say that your family information or Karen's or mine under whatever. I mean, I'm giving hypothetical that should not be released, and there's whatever it is. And then it got leaked. Wouldn't you want the mayor to find out why that got leaked? You would say, hey, look, your process of holding secret information or private information sucks. And even though it should have been released in this situation, for future legitimate situations, you better figure that shit out. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
He should have never held it. He should be voted out.
Exactly,
I think it's complete bullshit. Absolutely.
Okay.
He's misusing his authority.
All right, so
he's justifying.
Let me follow up on that. I really want to understand this. So from your perspective. So this is my point is this is public information that should never have been privatized to begin with.
Because there was no legitimate reason to privatize
I got it. I'm 100% with you. But the analogy that you brought up, the example that you brought up is not the same thing. Because it's not, when you said as a DA, if there's information that is genuinely private and needs to be managed in a process, in a judicial process, that's not publicly releasable or publicly available information. Those are categorically different.
I was just trying to find the closest the situation to give you an example. I'm just saying there's a process of holding information back from the public. That process was breached. He better figure it out for the future. That's all I'm saying. Maybe I should have said it that way.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, if you have a process that should have privatization, I mean, you want to make sure that process works.
I think that's right. I think that's what I'm saying. It's a process that was misapplied to this.
I was just he misapplied it to this, but it's still a process.
That's why I was stuck, because on your example, it should be applied in the situation you brought up.
I was talking about the process, though.
All right, fair enough. I think, like I said, I think we were saying the same thing differently, but it comes down to the same issue.
The issue is that he needs to go.
Exactly right. So we got this guy who seems to be a lot less concerned about what this Audrey Hale said, right? Then the fact that innocent people were killed, and it's freakish to me. He was more concerned about protecting the political ideologies than the fact that individuals were murdered.
Yes,
and that makes me sick.
And I think those families should start a movement and start a demand and have a public forum and have a town hall meeting where the mayor and the chief should take tough questions. And they should field tough questions and let them justify why they're arguably misapplying this factor here, because it's a bunch of bullshit. And they should be able to look at the citizens and answer questions to them.
I would like to initiate an investigation on what drove her to cold-blooded murder.
Yeah,
that's what I would like to do. What are the root of these ideologies?
Because we want to stop someone else from doing this and creating this other environment.
But there seems to be zero interest in that. But rather, let's go after the people that leaked it. Well, maybe you had something to do with that leak, dipshit, because maybe you shouldn't have had a process to hold back information that should have been publicly available. That's the point. And I'm telling you, this whole thing just stinks to high heaven. But guess what? That's where we are today.
I know, but I guess I'm saying I agree that it shouldn't have been held back. But the bigger question is he a Democrat? Is he a Republican? Because it was obviously done for
I don't know
political agenda. I don't know.
That's easy. Fine. You mean look it up? Just look it up. Or somebody knows someone mentioning it to Dom. I don't know. Just look on.
Yeah. How about my money's on Democrat?
How about my money is on Democrat also?
I have no idea.
No,
Those Republicans are just as stupid sometimes.
They are, but in this circumstance, because the manifesto didn't go along with their agenda.
But see, this is where the DA should have stepped in and said, "Look, the public has a right to know. Yes, it's painful. This is part of the healing process. I mean, Sutherland Springs, we wanted to figure out that evil bastard too. We have to figure this out so we can properly appoint blame, not at the object, not at an object, but at the person misusing an object evilly. So that's what happens. People don't want to get to the heart of the matter. That's what the problem is. We want to keep the narrative and the agenda on the object versus the person. We never do that. I've said that over before. Vehicular deaths outweigh gun-related deaths. When gun-related deaths, when you look at that data, include 60% plus, or up and down every year is a little different, of suicides, which is not what we're talking about here. That's tragic, don't get me wrong. But whether someone takes an overdose or shoots themselves, that's just the way to get to the ultimate means. That's the suicide's a different category, in my opinion, because that's not what we're afraid of for the public as a whole. And if you look at alcohol-related deaths, some years almost triples gun-related deaths. But nobody blames the alcohol or the vehicle. They blame the person who drank the alcohol to the point of intoxication, who got in the vehicle, misused that vehicle, caused the accident that led to the death. You see the illogical and inconsistent application of our blame. So nobody wants to ban alcohol. Nobody wants to sue manufacturers. Nobody wants to ban cars. No one's making a movement to make sure that all manufacturers create cars now and manufacture cars that can't go past 25 miles an hour. If you recall cars and buy back cars and make cars, manufacture cars where they cannot, it's impossible. They cannot function past 25 miles an hour. Nobody dies on the road. Even a drunk person, if a car can't go past 25, most likely will substantially lessen deaths. Nobody's making a movement for that. Why? Because there's no utility in a slow-ass car. Even though just 100.5 years ago, we were on wagons. And for us to go from here to downtown would have taken all day long walking in on a horse.
With utility comes risk, and there's no such thing as non-risk in a free society.
It's a bunch of bullshit. It's a fake argument.
The second you sign on to be a free society, you sign on to risk. I mean, you just do. There's no such thing. That's what comes with freedom. And the founder said you can't just have freedom, you have ordered liberty. There's rules, right? You got to consider your freedom and the impact of it on your neighbor. But you dissolve those considerations and you end up with chaos. But man, we gotta keep. And yes, Freddie O'Connell is a Democrat,
Okay.
elected. Yes.
What's up, Dom?
He's
Ray Rodriguez, to say about the town hall comment you just made, considering what's going on in the Senate, do you think we should start a similar movement to get the DA, mayor, chief, and sheriff to answer why crime is out of control in Bexar County?
Well, Ray asked that. You got to be on the mic so people can hear it too. But yes, I think they do. I guess Ray made a comment about should we do a look. All your public officials should be able to answer the public. When I was DA, I did a 15 or 16 cycle town hall meetings all over the county, and anybody could have come. They can ask me questions. There was going to be a back and forth. I was going to be respectful back and forth. We can be passionate. That's fine. Every public official should be doing it. Absolutely, you can do that. You do it. That's you need accountability of your elected officials, and yeah, of course, the current DA, the chief, the sheriff, and county commissioners, they all need to answer for this. The mayor, absolutely. I mean, look, San Antonio is becoming less safe because go down San Pedro. Look at all the immigrants down there. Look, I mean, just you can see people walking around. We gotta.
It's everywhere
we're
now.
We're getting questions, and we get calls about self-defense and when can I? And people are paranoid. They're scared. They're uneasy. I mean, this is reality, and we're not too far away from turning into a San Francisco if we don't watch it.
Yeah, and they'll respond by blowing it off. I mean, they will. I mean, they say, what compels our leaders to come and answer questions? We can't get people to can't get people to come out to vote.
I would like to get a bipartisan group to just talk about public safety. Just talk about the border and public safety. Again, I've said probably for the last 4 weeks in a row, I am the closest, if not, I'm already there of being a one-issue voter. It's the border. And all this other stuff we're talking about is going to be irrelevant if we don't have a border. We don't have a border. I mean, so we've got to have, and with that border is public safety. We can't even have our passionate debates on politics if we don't have a border, if we're not safe. Hey, let's go to a town hall meeting, but nobody feels safe to get there because they're going to get carjacked or shot or something.
I want a border too. I want the border back, or I want one that exists. But now that everybody's in already, I get it.
There needs to be a deportation program. There's no two. Look, Europe's done if they don't have a very strong deportation program. The over-Islamatization or whatever you want to call it of Europe, France, and all over this European country.
The videos are heartbreaking.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, they're having their prayers and thousands in the middle of the street blocking and blocking roadways, taking over. I mean, if Europe is done, I mean, look, Douglas Murray has a book out there. I have not read it. I'm sure George has read it. It's called what is it called? Hold on. It's called
The Strange Death of Europe. I have it.
The Strange Death of Europe.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Okay, good. I figured I'll refer you to George then.
Yeah,
The Strange Death of Europe. And it's Douglas Murray. I like him overall, by the way.
And he writes well.
But you've got to deport these people. I'm just have to. There's no two ways about it. But it'd be no different. It'd be no different if people invaded your home. Guess what? You would deport them from your home. I'm going to use the language. You would kick them out. They're criminally trespassing. It's called burglary habitation, criminal trespass, whatever you want to call it. You would defend your home, your property. You would move them, whatever you would have to do to defend it legally. We should have to do the same thing. We've got to take these people off our property. I'm sorry. We want to welcome them the right way. We want to make sure we know who's coming into our country, just like you want to know who's coming into your home. The hypocrisy is off the charts. We've got to start tying these issues in, which I think most people are on the same page on this one. When you got Eric Adams and all these other governors and mayors saying, hey, I was wrong. Just repent. I'll be with you. Just say, look, we were wrong. I had good intentions, but man, I really didn't calculate this one. And we should welcome them over, find common ground on that issue, and work to fix that. We can't be so tribalistic where it's like, nah, you're just the enemy. I mean, look, if someone says, look, I'm pro-life, but I don't want abortions after 4 months, I'm going to team up with you on that issue. I want more. I'm pro-life, but I'm going to start there. It's not an all or nothing. Just like our founding fathers. You think all of them wanted slavery? Study your history. They tolerated it and they set it up for down the road to abolish slavery. But they knew they could not get these 13 colonies together, and they needed all 13 of them to fight the king and to fight the crown, or else they wouldn't have been successful with this experiment. We're at the end of this experiment if we don't watch our ass. I mean, seriously, look at the place.
Why don't people believe that?
Because they've been indoctrinated.
It's just a matter of math. It's the same math problem here now that we're seeing in Europe. In Europe, it's much more advanced. But the birth rate among France's native population is around 1.4, 1.45 kids per woman. If you look at the Muslim birth rate, it's around 4.
Yes, 4.
So
because they can have multiple wives.
So in 30 years, you're going to have a majority Muslim population in France. That's just a reality right now. Because right now the population's right around 12 million, maybe 13 million Muslims and growing. Somewhere around, that's about right. About anywhere from about 12 to 15%, and you're looking maybe at about 10 million people or something like that. At that kind of birth rate in 3 decades, there you have it. So the question is France okay with giving up its culture? Man, I don't know, man. I just don't know. You got to step back. I don't even know what to say. It's suicide.
Stupid.
I mean, what are we doing here?
Doing the same thing, basically.
But you have to teach your citizens why it's a good idea to stay American, why it's a good idea to embrace the ideals that founded the country. It has to be taught, and we're not teaching that. We're teaching the actual. We're either not teaching it at all, or we're teaching the exact opposite. We're teaching our kids to hate themselves, and that's how long do you think that's going to last? Right before you have an internal collapse. That's just reality. It's why we always keep coming back to parents. We're not powerless here. I mean, I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist too. But I'm an optimist in terms of our future. I think the solution is with parents. I do.
Okay, I get what you're saying, but ringing in the back of my head, I keep on thinking about the Vatican and what they've done. And Catholics, like David Rodriguez, who sits in here with the Garden Show, he goes to church every single day. He, follows the Catholic Church. And I'm not criticizing that. It's great that he has faith. But when your own church, like the Vatican, starts opening up the laws that in my mind, go against the Bible, I think to myself, what do Catholics do then? Do they just go along with what the Vatican said because the Pope said it and we're following that rule? I mean, they have a political agenda also, obviously.
Well, I mean, there's so much. You open up a can of worms for me. So look at the disproportionate criticism. So check in any mosques if they have a pro-transgender movement. Check in all these Islamic countries if they have
That's a big no.
if they have LGBT
No,
rights. That's
they
why this whole
don't.
Queers for Palestine really is baffling to me. That's like chickens for Chick-fil-A or whatever that meme is out there. It's funny to me. It's just
Right.
ridiculous. But so just think about that. But yet Islam doesn't get the same criticism. Look at the treatment of the treatment under a Sharia environment. Okay, I mean I understand that there's Islamic people that reject and repudiate Sharia and the Hadith and different things. I got it. Check. Well then it's not Islam. If you're going to go to an Islamic environment, they're going to call you an apostate, and there's consequences to that. Let's just call balls and strikes. We've got to educate people and understand something. True Islam is an imperialistic mindset. The goal is one caliphate, one ruling body, theocracy, under one caliph. That's the strife and the battle within Islam and the different sects, Shiites and Sunnis and all this. I mean, there's a battle between there too. But you have to look at the ideology under Islam. It's just you have to, and it should be done respectfully. It should be done objectively, and we go to the sources and look at. You don't judge an ideology by its abuse. So when someone gives an example of some dumb dick Christian that's not following Christianity, because I always say the 11th commandment is don't be an asshole, right? So and then they're violating the 11th commandment, and they're not following Christianity. Well, then you don't blame and convict Christianity for a bad agent. I want to look at the edicts and the ideology and the principles of Christianity. Let's analyze that. And so we should do the same thing with Islam. Because we all say, well, I know a very nice Muslim family. I got it. So do I have Islamic friends. I get it. We're passionate. But okay, let's break it down. Let's break it down to what the different ideology under both mindsets and that's it. And that should be done objectively. Bill Maher does it. I'm glad he criticized. I mean, I'd love to go back and see that Ben Affleck and Bill Maher debate and Sam Harris, where Ben Affleck's all emotion. He's no substance. Sam and Bill are substantively criticizing legitimately, objectively, not emotionally, the ideology. And then you go back and forth. So we got to get away from emotion. I'm fine with passion. And let's just objectively look at things. And so there's a difference. And I've seen it when I was in office, and there's this move for Sharia courts and what that actually means. Nobody really wants that. Then say that. Then I would like to see a reform movement within Islam. How many Islamic groups have repudiated Hamas? Give me one. I'll wait. Give me one Islamic group, one Islamic advocacy group, one Islamic country that has repudiated Hamas and what's happened over there, Hezbollah or anybody else. I just want to know.
So I think that's the bottom line.
I mean, George,
it's the bottom line, really. I mean,
that's
you could
all.
say, I know a few
Not
Muslims
mad.
who are friendly. They're really sweet people, and I do actually. I mean, I do. Just sweet people who love the country, who are just as proud as America as I am.
Yes.
But the reality is, there's no political power there. Where's the political power? Where's the inertia? The inertia is on radical Islamism, which is fundamental to Islam. It just is. It's fundamental. It's inherent to Islam. And the fact that there are some Muslims who repudiate that, who believe, I think erroneously, because if you look at Islamic scholarship, you'll be able to see that the concept of jihad is not some personal jihad. It's not because this is the argument that comes back, apologetic that comes back and says that that's the notion of a violent jihad, which is war. The notion of a violent jihad is a fringe belief within Islam. The majority of Islam believes in a personal jihad, meaning you struggle, kind of like Christians struggle
sanctification
to overcome sin or whatever. That's how it's positioned, but it's actually the opposite. If you look at jihad is war to establish Islam. It simply is. And whether you look at the Quran and how it frames it there, or if you look at some of the most powerful traditions, the hadiths are the traditions. They're authoritative.
There's more than one. Yeah.
There's thousands of them, but there's maybe one or two that are truly authoritative. The Sahih al-Muslim and the Sahih al-Bukhari are the two most authoritative traditions inside Islam. And if you look at how it frames Islamic Jihad. It's war to establish the faith, and it's violent war. It's not some peaceful view of jihad. So how do you contend with that? Well, you got to deal with it for what it is. You got to talk about it like it is. But we won't. This is the problem. We won't have an honest conversation about it, and we pay the price for it.
Do you see, though, that there are more of like the Hollywood types that are coming forward for Israel? I guess I'm surprised at that, because
It's kind of self-deprivation, right?
it's the only divide that I'm seeing, because usually the Hollywood's all for
The left woke
the left,
movement.
exactly. But I'm finally seeing some. Like, I know that this is ridiculous, but I saw Bono from U2 talking about Israel, and to me that was hope that people will at least investigate what it's all about instead of just jumping on a side without knowing the facts.
Yeah. Well, there are some signs of hope. Gal Gadot, right?
Yes.
She is Wonder Woman,
Yep, I saw that.
and she's Israeli, and she said she was going to have a viewing
You have to.
for
Right.
Hamas crimes
Yep.
in Hollywood. And I want to know, has that happened? Will that happen? I want to keep track of that, because I think that's important. I do. I know Israel is doing more and more of that to expose people to the atrocities that Hamas committed on October 7th. We have to have an open conversation, honest conversation about it. We
What
don't
George
do
said is
censorship.
so important. People have got to. I'm telling you, there's a difference between hearing about evil and seeing evil. I had a client that got into an accident and 3 people passed away, and this person was injured also, but he was charged with manslaughter, facing a lot of years. And then looking at him, and then he heard about the death of the people on the other side. One of them was a little girl, and then he had to come in and look at the discovery. And it visibly changes you. You have to see it. You have to see the death and destruction. And what these people did was barbaric. I mean, all this movement of, that's just a narrative. Is that propaganda? It's Israel propaganda. Until people were forced to look at the videos. And the celebration. And then I heard some unhinged, God, what was his name? I almost sent it to you, George and Karen. I wish I would have. He's a former Marine. He's unhinged about, this wasn't terrorism. This was a military exercise. What military goal did they have? Tell me the military base they took out. I mean, but Israel is committing war crimes, he was saying. But this was a military movement. From what? Occupying what? Have you looked at the region and the Arab nations and the Islamic nations and the sea of control, and then that little strip of Jersey called Israel? And who's occupying what? I mean, Netanyahu, who's not perfect, and I'm not an apologist for Israel, by the way. They can stand on their own. I'll call balls and strikes. They screw up, screw them, screw up, whatever. And, they don't get a free pass. But they're having these. They want people to get out. They're trying to have these hours of get out, whatever. They waited days before they attacked. Here's I had a debate with somebody. It turned into a debate. I said, let me give you the only analogy. I've upped up my analogy. I said, so you're telling me, what would you do if someone stormed into your home, say your family, let's say this guy has a pretty big family, and they butchered a portion of your family, a portion of your family, and kidnapped a couple of them, and then ran into a middle school would they say, hey, we're at the middle school, don't touch me, talk to me now, we'll negotiate? You're fucking full of shit. How about that? I said it to him. You would storm the middle school, give the middle school time, get the kids out, someone get them out the back, do whatever. But you want your family back, and you want justice for the butchering of your family. That's the analogy. There's no other analogy. That's what happened. What do we expect Israel to do? You've got to look at the videos. You've got to see the pictures of the children. And yes, children were massacred. Women were raped.
And yet,
Viciously. Vaginas torn. Can we just say it? Do you know what a rape involves? Decapitations, burnings, children in mommy's arms, children with their hands in front of their face as they're being shot through their hand into their heads. Celebration of this demonic behavior. And then you want to talk now? Hey, checkmate, I'm back at home base. Now, that doesn't mean you should be reckless, but don't call Israel's actions war crimes and not call out the fucking animals that did this. It's disingenuous and it's bullshit. And there's no other way to say it. People need to see this, Karen, and understand what we're really dealing with here. And this selective outrage and this. George has brought this up in the past, and this moral equivalence. It's not the same situation. That doesn't mean Israel should be irresponsible. I have not seen, as a whole, I'm not saying individual actions, irresponsible behavior. They were calculated. I get it. I don't want to see a Palestinian boy crying over his Baba and saying, Baba, don't leave me. Of course that breaks my heart. I don't want to see that either. But that is on Hamas's hands.
Right. There have been legitimately documented atrocities, but on an individual basis. And they're relative to a policy of mass extermination, completely rare. But this comes from somewhere. This is what's taught, and it's been taught for decades, that Israel is as responsible, if not more, in fact, more responsible for a mass extermination, a genocidal policy, an occupying imperialistic policy.
That's not true,
and
man.
that's just fundamentally untrue. But when you're taught this decade after decade, you can't be surprised. Look, I was thinking about, does the date September 5th, 1972 mean anything to you? September 5th, 1972 at the Munich Games. You know where I'm going with this? Black September was a Palestinian terrorist organization that abducted 11 Israeli athletes and murdered all of them in Munich, Germany. September 5th, 1972. We have a French intellectualist by the name of Jean-Paul Sartre. He was a playwright, an intellectualist, philosopher. Okay, this is in 1972. We're probably about 8 years removed from the birth of the concept of the Palestinian, which again was invented out of whole cloth in the early 60s. In 1972, after this happened, just to give you an example of how effective and how pervasive this notion of the Palestinian as the proverbial victim had become. Here's Jean-Paul Sartre. This is a philosopher, an educator, a playwright, an intellectualist. Quote, in this war, the Palestinians' only weapon is terrorism. It's a terrible weapon, but the oppressed poor have no other. And the French, who approved terrorism against the French, must approve in turn the Palestinians' terroristic action. This abandoned, betrayed, exiled people can show its courage and the force of its hate only by organizing deadly attacks. Jean-Paul Sartre is encapsulating the posture of American academia on this issue today. This is what kids are taught. So Israel is by definition the proverbial attacker. They're the oppressor, and the Palestinians are forever memorialized as the victims.
But hold on.
Period.
But why?
This is what's taught.
Answer me this question, Karen. Why aren't these Arabian countries taking in Palestinians? Why has Egypt?
Right,
Why has
exactly.
Egypt moved tanks to the border, saying we're prepared to die to keep our borders safe?
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? I mean, that's a legitimate
Because
question.
they know the truth.
Well, I don't know. Is it because many of the citizens have been radicalized? I mean, Hamas took over. They were voted in.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Has there been a revolt, a pushback, some movement, leave, do something, come up with a plan, try to establish, and they know they won't. They'll be destroyed if they bought in. Have you seen some of the indoctrination of children yelling death to? I mean, I heard I've not verified this of a 4-year-old that was kidnapped, that was handed over to Palestinian kids to beat the little boy. I mean, what is this tension? I mean, look, you have Hamas in their charter. We've talked about this before. Is you die. How do you negotiate with that? Just the fact that they're trying to reestablish Palestine and say we don't want to take. Netanyahu at least said it. He can say something and do something other. I get all that. We don't want to take over Gaza. We want to establish true freedom for the Palestinians. But you got to take out this mindset. You got to take out Hamas. How do you negotiate with someone that says, I want to kill you? Again, what do you say? How are you going to kill me? When are you going to kill me? Can you hold off at least? No, I want to kill you. I don't care how I do it. I'm just going to kill you. Well, shit, there's nothing to talk about. It's either you take me out or I take you out. There's no talking to these folks. So Hamas has to be destroyed.
That's really that's important.
That's the ideology.
There's no talking because it's religious revolutionism. This is a religion. This revolutionary violence is inculcated in their identity. It's an expression of higher morality. I mentioned Sartre in the 70s. His partner, a French woman by the name of Simone de Beauvoir, she was a feminist. See, she took that oppressed to the man-woman battlefield. He's talking about the Palestinians as one battlefield, right? We see that here in the United States with regard to blacks and whites. She took that to the feminist battlefield. And here's what she wrote. A revolutionary regime must get rid of a certain number of individuals who threaten it. And I see no means for this than death. It's always possible to get out of a prison. Like the revolutionaries of 1793 probably didn't kill enough people. He's talking about the French Revolution. The end means is power, and the end is death. Period, end story. How do you negotiate with someone like that who believes that as part of their expression of higher morality, you must die? That's what we're dealing with here. This is very much alive in American academics. And I'd love to go through a number of examples, but this is everywhere.
But
it's not here and it's not there. It's everywhere.
But good for Colombia to at least push back on this. I mean, look, they created the monster because they festered and indoctrinated this mindset and this victim. And like George always says, if you're a constant victim, what aren't you justified in doing? That's the mindset of our young people. You're justified in doing anything almost, right? Because you're the victim and you're the oppressed, and the oppressor needs to be stopped at all costs. And so, but at least there's got to be a forceful pushback. There has to be consequences. And this two-tiered approach to this, I mean, look, we can go on and on, Karen. I know we have only 5 minutes left, but we can go on and on. I mean, just look what happened at the White House. You're going to tell me, can you imagine if that was a bunch of Proud Boys, not that I support or don't support them, I don't know enough about their organization, or conservatives or MAGA or Republicans storming the White House gate and spray painting they would look for statutes that they violated, even though they're climbing the gates. They're shaking the gates. I mean, there's a federal statute. I mean, I've investigated it, researched it, but how many arrests were made? I don't know. We don't hear about that. Would be on 24/7 newsreel. Look at these maniacs. I mean, so that has to change. The media, we've got to get true journalism back. Just report what's happening. Let me, her, him, everybody make up your own mind. And then I'll fight for her mind and his mind to give the lens on how to look at that situation. But journalists are advocates today. These are not
absolutely,
and they're advocates of this revolutionary mindset. You brought up France, but France is basically reaping what it sows, and it's French intellectual elites, professors, university teachers, counselors, philosophers who have been pushing. This is my point. They push the revolution from the inside, and they're far more effective than political leaders because they have a dedicated audience that subsidizes them to teach them bullshit. This is really, really important to gauge because this is what's going on right now. We need to keep coming back to that. Here's a very popular French, you got to read the language here. French philosopher Michel Foucault. And here's what he wrote about the proletariat.
Well, explain what that is.
Well, there's the proletariat, which is basically the oppressed. Okay? The bourgeoisie is the merchant, the wealthy merchant, the capitalist, the oppressor. And then you have this proletariat, those poor victims, those poor working class people. Here's what he says. This is in 1971. I just want to understand that this is a heritage of revolution in France. And that the Islamization of France is just a prong against the white European. It's a way to overturn the established order. And the French have imbibed that. And French elites and intellectuals have welcomed the Islamization, largely speaking, until it comes and bites them in the ass in their own front door. Then they're going to change their mind. But they're not quite done destroying themselves. But this has a long heritage. Listen to this. Quote, the proletariat doesn't wage war against the ruling class because it considers a war to be just. That's why I don't buy this social justice bullshit. It's not about justice. And he's saying it himself. He's like, the proletariat isn't waging war against the ruling class because it considers the war to be just. The proletariat makes war against the ruling class because, for the first time in their history, it wants to take power. When the proletariat takes power, it may be quite possible that the proletariat will exert toward the classes over which it has triumphed a violent, dictatorial, and even bloody power. I can't see what objection could possibly be made to this. End of quote. The objective is power for the sake of power, to crush an enemy they believe is fundamentally evil. This is why you can't negotiate with this. This is why we have to win elections. We have to win elections.
But you're not going to win elections unless you win hearts and minds.
Back. True enough. True enough. We ran out of time here today, but we got to continue this on some other time because the conversation's not
forever.
over.
What the hell? We could talk forever on this stuff, man. And people need to have these conversations. We need to be armed with knowledge, be able to articulate your position, try to change hearts and minds, because the change or lack of change is going to affect the vote. Encourage people to vote. Tell them that it matters. Tell them to be look. Everyone stays quiet until it comes to their front door. It's at your front door. Everybody, how do you not feel it? How do you not feel the border is a mess? How do you not feel young people are confused. Old people are confused too. What the hell, everybody? But I'm just saying there's a lack of moral compass and a set of ideas. What set of ideas, because ideas have consequences, what set of ideas do we want to control our culture, the way we do things, and our laws? That to me, it boils down to that. Then let's have a debate about those ideas. You want to label your ideas one way, I'll label mine another. The labeling of ideas just gets into tribalism when you really think about it. But ideas are still ideas. And I go back to Bill Clinton, that the greatest threat we had in 1995 during the State of the Union address was illegal immigration. That idea holds true today. It's even more true today. But a Democrat was saying it back then. The idea still holds true. The idea of defunding the police, just to defund the police as a whole, as an institution, is a shitty idea. And I think that played out, and that's why all these mayors and these pro-defunders are changing their position. All these sanctuary people, sanctuary city advocates, these elected officials, because that idea sucks. It doesn't work. They thought it worked. It was a theory. It was a hypothesis. They tested it. Damn, it sucks. So we've got to get into that discussion and then win hearts and minds over to say, let's vote for these ideas, regardless of what they are. And because we really got to get serious about this, and we have to be more strategic. I hope the Republican Party and conservatives, independents, we're going to welcome people over, win. You're going to win by, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, man. How do you climb a mountain? One grip at a time. You've got to start doing these things. We can't win. We're not going to win this back overnight. But if we don't start being strategic, we're not going to win it back at all. So that's it, guys. Thanks for joining us. God bless you guys. Happy Veterans Day. I hope you enjoyed this. Share this with someone you think might enjoy it. And God willing, we will see you next week.